History is often told through epic battles and royal decrees, with tales of mighty kings and queens shaping the fate of nations. We remember the thunder of armies clashing on open fields, the ink of treaties that redrew borders, and the grand ceremonies that marked the rise and fall of dynasties. Yet beneath these sweeping events, there are moments, small, almost invisible at first, that alter the course of history just as profoundly. Sometimes it's not the roar of battle or the stroke of a pen, but a single act of betrayal that changes everything. In the silent corridors of power, trust can be shattered in an instant, and the consequences can echo for generations. Imagine for a moment the crown, the very symbol of a kingdom's unity and authority, stolen not by a foreign invader, but by someone from within the royal family itself. The act is unthinkable, a violation of every oath and tradition that holds a monarchy together. Yet that's exactly what unfolded in the Kingdom of Aragon in the early 1400s, a time when Europe was a patchwork of rival realms and shifting alliances. Aragon, with its proud castles and bustling cities, was suddenly thrust into turmoil by a crime that would become legend. The theft of the crown wasn't just a bold crime, it was a direct and public challenge to the very legitimacy of the monarchy. The royal court was thrown into chaos, and suspicion poisoned the air as nobles and commoners alike questioned who could be trusted. The man behind this audacious act was no ordinary thief. He was a nobleman who believed with every fiber of his being that the throne was his by right. Stealing the crown was not just a crime, it was his desperate, dangerous bid to seize power and rewrite the destiny of Aragon. This single act of betrayal plunged Aragon into chaos. The streets buzzed with rumors, the markets filled with angry debates, and the castle gates bristled with tension. The fragile threads holding the kingdom together began to unravel, threatening to tear the realm apart. Today, we'll uncover the story behind this infamous betrayal, how one man's ambition and a stolen crown shook an entire kingdom, and how the echoes of that act still linger in the pages of history. Our story begins, as so many do, with a king who died without an heir, leaving a throne and a nation vulnerable to the ambitions of those who would stop at nothing to claim the crown for themselves. To truly understand the theft that would soon shake the kingdom, we must first look at Aragon as it existed in the early 15th century, a powerful confederation of realms, each with its own traditions, laws, and rulers, rather than a single unified nation. The Crown of Aragon was a patchwork of territories, stretching from the Pyrenees to the Mediterranean, encompassing not just Aragon itself, but also Catalonia, Valencia, and distant lands like Sardinia and Sicily. This diversity was both its strength and its greatest vulnerability. In 1410, the sudden death of King Martin I without a legitimate heir sent shockwaves through the realm. The direct royal line, which had provided stability for generations, was abruptly extinguished. The throne, once a symbol of unity, now stood empty, and the future of the entire confederation was thrown into doubt. This crisis triggered a dangerous and unpredictable power vacuum. Nobles, bishops, and powerful cities quickly took sides, each backing their own favored claimant to the throne. The halls of power echoed with heated debates, secret alliances, and bitter rivalries, as the great families of Aragon, Catalonia, and Valencia maneuvered for advantage. The kingdom teetered on the edge of civil war. Armed factions gathered in city streets, and the threat of open conflict loomed over every negotiation. Loyalties shifted with alarming speed, and no one could predict who would emerge victorious from the chaos. The interregnum, a tense 2-year period of uncertainty, saw the kingdom's unity unravel. With no clear ruler, the machinery of government faltered, and the once mighty crown of Aragon seemed to be crumbling from within. The people grew anxious, and the nobility grew restless, each fearing what the future might bring. The royal crown itself became more than just a symbol of authority. It was the ultimate prize, the object of every contender's ambition. Whoever could claim it would not only rule Aragon, but also control its vast and diverse territories. Among the many contenders was James II, Count of Urgell. He was a man of noble birth, strong character, and unwavering conviction that the throne was rightfully his by blood and by law. His claim was supported by many, but opposed by powerful rivals who saw him as a threat to their own ambitions. As the crisis deepened, it became clear that the fate of Aragon would not be decided by swords alone. Behind closed doors, diplomats and nobles engaged in secret negotiations, forging alliances and making promises that could change the course of history. The outcome would hinge on a political gamble, one that would test the loyalty and cunning of every player involved. The stage was set for betrayal, ambition, and a desperate act that would echo through the centuries. In the shadows of the royal court, plots were hatched and loyalties were tested, as each faction sought to outmaneuver the others and seize the crown for themselves. And at the very center of this storm stood a man who believed he was destined to rule, but who was about to be denied everything he had ever hoped for. The fate of Aragon and the legacy of its crown hung in the balance. James II of Urgell was no distant pretender. He was the great-grandson of a king, a man whose bloodline pulsed with royal ambition and centuries of noble tradition. Born into the heart of the Aragonese nobility, James grew up surrounded by the symbols and rituals of power, always aware of his family's legacy and the expectations that came with it. From a young age, he was taught that his destiny was intertwined with the fate of the crown. He had once been named Governor-General, a clear sign he was seen as heir. This prestigious appointment was not just ceremonial. It placed him at the center of Aragonese politics, giving him first-hand experience in governance and the confidence that he was next in line. The court watched him closely, and many whispered that the future of the kingdom rested on his shoulders. James was proud, ambitious, and utterly convinced of his right to rule. He carried himself with the bearing of a king, never doubting that the throne was his by birthright. His confidence inspired some and intimidated others, but he never wavered in his belief that he was destined to wear the crown. Many nobles supported him, drawn by his lineage and his commanding presence. In the halls of power, he acted like a king in waiting, holding court with his allies and making plans for the future. His supporters believed that only James could restore stability and honor to the realm. But James had powerful enemies and a reputation for arrogance, which cost him crucial allies. His unwavering self-assurance sometimes crossed into stubbornness, alienating those who might have helped him. Rival factions at court began to plot against him, seeing his pride as a weakness to exploit. While James relied on his bloodline and the legitimacy it brought, others built coalitions, forging alliances through marriage, negotiation, and promises of power. The political game in Aragon was ruthless, and those who played it well gained influence at James's expense. As the succession crisis dragged on, James's confidence turned to frustration. He watched as his rivals maneuvered behind closed doors, feeling the ground shift beneath his feet. The certainty that once defined him began to erode, replaced by a growing sense of isolation and anger. He watched as committees debated his fate, feeling betrayed by a process he saw as rigged against him. The endless meetings and political intrigue left him powerless, forced to rely on the very nobles he distrusted. Each day his hope faded a little more. His sense of injustice grew, setting him on a path toward a desperate act. The sting of betrayal and the weight of lost opportunity haunted him, fueling a dangerous resolve. James began to consider risks he once would have dismissed, determined to reclaim what he believed was rightfully his. The man who believed he was destined to be king would soon risk everything to prove it. With his back against the wall, James prepared to challenge the very system that had denied him, ready to stake his life and legacy on one final gamble. And that risk would change Aragon forever, setting in motion a chain of events that would echo through the kingdom's history for generations to come. The interregnum was a time of fear and division. Without a king, law and order broke down, and rival factions clashed across the land. The parliaments of Aragon, Catalonia, and Valencia struggled to agree on a successor. The threat of civil war loomed, and the kingdom's unity was at stake. To avoid disaster, leaders turned to a radical solution. A committee of 9 delegates would choose the next king. This compromise of Caspi was a bold experiment in political arbitration. For James of Urgell, it felt like a betrayal, his birthright reduced to a committee vote. The kingdom's fate now rested on a handful of men, and the stakes could not have been higher. In 1412, the Compromise of Caspi convened, with 9 delegates weighing the claims of James of Urgell and Ferdinand of Antequera. Ferdinand, a Castilian prince, had a weaker blood claim, but powerful allies and a reputation for stability. The delegates, fearing chaos, saw Ferdinand as the safer choice. The vote was decisive. Ferdinand was crowned King Ferdinand of Aragon. For James, it was a crushing blow, his birthright denied by politics. The compromise ended the crisis, but installed a foreign dynasty and left James furious. He refused to accept the verdict, seeing it as a corrupt bargain. Betrayed and desperate, James was pushed to the brink. His next move would be bold, reckless, and unforgettable. The stage was set for the theft that would become legend. Reeling from defeat, James of Urgell refused to bow to Ferdinand. Pressured by his supporters, he launched a rebellion, seeking a symbol to legitimize his cause. In a daring move, James or his loyalists stole the royal crown of Aragon. The theft was a direct insult to Ferdinand and a bold claim to legitimacy. James hoped the crown would rally support and allow him to stage his own coronation. But instead, the act was seen as sacrilege and treason, turning many against him. The rebellion faltered, and Ferdinand's forces moved swiftly to crush it. The stolen crown, meant to inspire, became a symbol of James's failure. His gamble had backfired, sealing his fate. The kingdom would never be the same. James's rebellion was short-lived. Ferdinand's army besieged James's stronghold, forcing his surrender in 1413. The stolen crown was recovered, and James was imprisoned for life. His lands and titles were stripped, and he died in captivity, once a would-be king, now a cautionary tale. The failed revolt solidified Ferdinand's rule and silenced opposition. But the scars ran deep, especially in Catalonia, where resentment lingered for generations. The theft of the crown became a symbol of a kingdom divided by ambition and betrayal. The monarchy survived, but the unity it represented was forever changed. The echoes of this crisis would shape Aragon for years to come. While nobles fought for power, ordinary people suffered most. The interregnum brought hardship, trade collapsed, lawlessness spread, and daily life was fraught with danger. For many, Ferdinand's coronation brought relief and hope for stability. But in regions loyal to James, the outcome felt like a betrayal, and the theft of the crown was seen as a heroic stand. The conflict divided communities and families, leaving bitterness in its wake. In the end, the people were left to pick up the pieces after the ambitions of the powerful had torn their world apart. The story of the stolen crown was a stark reminder of their own vulnerability. They were witnesses to a royal feud that became a national crisis. The stolen crown of Aragon is more than a historical curiosity. It's a lesson in ambition, legitimacy, and the fragility of power. James of Urgell's downfall shows the danger of entitlement and the need to adapt to changing realities. The compromise of Caspe set Aragon on a new path, leading to the unification of Spain. The crown, once a symbol of unity, became a reminder of division and the cost of unresolved succession. History is shaped by moments of crisis and the choices people make under pressure. The story reminds us that even the strongest institutions depend on shared belief and consensus. The past is filled with tales like this, of ambition, betrayal, and the enduring weight of a crown. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more journeys into the dramatic moments that shaped our world.